What's up guys, welcome back to Fancy Goldfish Fanatics. Today we are going to be scaping the monster marine aquarium, so make sure you stay tuned to find out more. Hey Fanatics family, welcome back. As always, check out those links in the description. Make sure to check out Jimmy Goldfish if you're from the USA, and check out Star Fisheries if you're from the UK. They can ship fish all over the UK and have an absolutely huge range of fish in stock and some absolute great quality fish. But on to today's video, we are going to be scaping the monster marine aquarium, and I cannot wait to get some rock and sand in it and really get creative on that scape. Now, this is an absolutely huge tank, so we have a huge amount of rock. I believe I've weighed the rock and there's around 175 kilos of rock, and then we've got 80 kilos of sand. So the tank as it is 280 kilos plus 175 kilo of rock and 80 kilo of sand, and that's before we get any water in it. So I'm going to spin the camera around, we're going to start the scape. Also, I might talk a little bit more about the filter and then maybe talk about that at the end of the video. If you've got any ideas of what fish I can put or should put in this tank, leave a comment down below. I do have a pretty rough idea in my head, but I'm not going to let you guys know just yet. So I'm going to spin the camera around and let's get scaping. As you can see, if you haven't seen the previous episodes, the tank is 8 feet long, 3 foot wide and 2.5 foot tall. I have built in this inbuilt sump filter, and here is 175 kilos of marine reef rock. This is all natural rock. We didn't use any man-made rock, as I wanted this to be as natural as possible and have a huge surface area for the size and number of fish I'm going to be putting in here, so it can sustain a really large beneficial bacteria colony. We were putting in all of the large rocks to start with, so each of the rocks were individually sectioned off. So we had small rocks, medium rocks and large rocks. All of the large rocks were used to create the bridges, the tunnels and the base for all three structures. I really wanted to hide the filter so you couldn't see it and it was completely out of sight, and especially when you're sitting down on the sofa, you really cannot see the filter at all, and the rocks have really done a great job at hiding it, and it looks like there is no equipment in the tank at all. There are also 2 wave makers on the filter. We have a really large Tunzi wave maker and then a variable speed J-Cord or J-Bout wave maker as well, which I can random the flow and change the flow around so we get some sort of random movement around the tank, and flow is essential, especially for a reef tank. So we tried to create a good triangle across the tank, dragging the eye from one end all the way down to the other, with lots of branches and plating rock and bridges, etc. So we really created some nice features and swim throughs for the fish. But finally, after around, I'd say half an hour, all of the rock was in position, and here is the final shot showing you around the tank. It's quite hard to see at the moment with the rock currently in place. It doesn't look too exciting, so to say, but once the tank is full and once it starts to mature, you'll really see the beauty of this tank. And when you look from one end all the way down to the other, you can really see how long this scape is. It is really hard to capture on video, but it's absolutely huge. So the fish will really create lots of movement throughout this tank and the rock provides a great home for them. I'm just adding the sand in now. As you can see, this is an unconventional black sand that I'm adding to the tank, and I'll speak a little bit further about that later in the video and why I've chosen to go for the black substrate. But overall, I absolutely love the end result of the tank. We've got the black background, the black silicone, the black tape around the top and bottom of the tank, and then we've also got the black acrylic filter, so it really accents the rocks and really will highlight the fish and corals that we put in the tank. The spotlight is the fish and the corals, and I really wanted to create something slightly different and really try to sort of break the standard boundaries as always and try something just completely different from the norm. So you may have seen I've chosen to go for a black sand in this aquarium setup, and I briefly mentioned that. So generally with marine setups, you want to go for a coral sand or a coral gravel because this has some extra benefits to the tank. Mainly it does buffer your water, however, generally it doesn't come into its buffering capacity because generally the pH is at 8 or above. So the pH is in an alkaline or basic level, so it is not low enough for it to start buffering the water, and generally the coral sand is more natural for the fish. However, you can see that I've gone for a black sand, and this is very different to usual. Now, there are quite a few tanks online and out there that do use a black sand. There are some negatives potentially to it. It can contain some metal sometimes, and it is good to run a magnet through it to collect any metal shavings because they can be quite high in metal. However, I am not going to be doing any difficult corals. I may do some soft coral in this tank, but I'm not going to be doing any difficult corals, so I don't have to worry about that too much, and I don't really have to focus on those specific minor trace elements for my corals, as the fish are far more robust and can deal with a huge amount of parameters. Now, the sand I actually used in this tank is a tropical sand, and is generally found at your local Maidenhead Aquatics, and I used 4 bags of this at 20 kilos each. Now, this is generally used for tropical tanks, and a lot of you may say you really should have used a coral sand, but as I said, this is quite an experiment tank. I'm trying to break the boundaries, do something a little bit different. I've got a different style of filter. I'm going for a different style of setup with no sump, no canisters, etc. And we're going to go with this black substrate. If this black substrate works, I think the fish are really going to pop. And as this is going to be a fish only tank, we are going to be sort of getting some nice larger fish, some really colourful fish. We will have some probably corals and macroalgae in there, but we won't be focusing too much on the corals in particular. And the fish are really going to be the focus. So I'm hoping with the right lighting, the black substrate, the black silicone, the black trim, the black background, the black filter, we are really going to have that focus all on the fish, and I've really tried to emphasize that in the way I've had this tank designed and built. Absolutely ecstatic with the scape we've done. I absolutely love it. We've got loads of tunnels, caves, loads of crevices, plenty of areas for fish to hide, and we haven't got a huge amount of rock on the substrate, so hopefully it's going to be quite easy to maintain this aquarium. Now, onto the filter a little bit. I haven't spoken too much about it, but as you saw in this video and the previous video, we have constructed our internal box filter, and many of you may be saying an internal filter is not a great idea. However, if we cast our minds to the outdoor Ranchu tank, we have 2 of the dual BioFlow 11.0 filters, and basically these are just a container to hold our media of choice. They are working extremely well on that pond and really keeping the water in check, and essentially I've just built a huge version of my own, which holds, I believe it holds around 100 to 120 litres, so it's the same as me using 10 or 11 of those dual BioFlow 11.0 filters, and I believe each one of those filters is supposed to do around 500 litres. So essentially I've got this huge internal box filter, we've got some sponge which will be covered in filter fleece to trap all the really fine particles before the water ends up going down into this huge refugium. And for those of you who do not know, a refugium is basically a large area where you can grow some macro algae or plants, and these suck up all of those nutrients in the water. Then it goes through 5 kilos of biohome, which is in the bottom of the filter, and then returns back through the tank. Now, I will speak a little bit more about the return because I have been a little bit vague and a little bit hidden about what I'm going to be doing with the return on the filter, but some of you may have guessed, maybe you've seen the air pump in the shot on some of the clips. but I will probably be talking about that in the next episode where we start to talk about the equipment and the setup of the tank before we start getting some water and some inhabitants into it and get it all going. But I cannot wait for that. If you've got any questions or queries or any comments, leave those down below. If you made it to the end of the video, then thank you all for watching. Remember to keep those water changes up and happy fish keeping.